All right, guys, we are back with one we are really excited about. So, we are talking to Christopher Packard, the author of a book that we're using for our newest season of Maine called The Mythical Creatures of Maine. Chris, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking about my favorite subject.
And how did it become your favorite subject? That was a perfect little segue because in your book you reference your what is it, great great grandfather, correct? So this
Yeah.
seems to be very connected to your family, and you can give us a little backstory about how you got into all the mythical legends and lores that apparently Maine has to offer.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, it's thick with them.
We had no
And
idea, by the way. We had
yeah,
no idea. So your book was a
it's
great start.
it's been really interesting to see like the way people receive it and which of these legends is still sort of active, and that's been one of the best parts of this journey. But how I got started on it was my family has been in Maine a very long time, and I grew up playing in the woods in central Maine. If you tried to put your finger in the middle of the state, uh, it would be near Sebec Lake, which is where my family has been for 4 generations. And my grandfather is a hunter, was a hunter, trapper, guide, construction worker, doing it all, Yankee kind of style. And he would take us out in the summers and tell us about these creatures, like these what now today I know are fearsome critters, and they were kind of like odd and unusual and strange and kind of scary, and you kind of didn't want to believe in them, but you just spent a lot of time looking for him anyways. And he was so deadpan and would just really delight in telling them, and he would also like do other things that made it so believable. And as a person who knew a ton about nature, and so I just enjoyed those, and I kind of outgrew them. I just never really thought much more about them as I grew up, became a biologist, became a biology teacher, and moved around a bit, moved to Bangor, and was in a thrift store one day, and I picked up a folklore book about old New England folklore, and there were these creatures that my grandfather had talked about. And I had always just assumed that he was making them up, that he was just like, these were just jokes that he was coming up with. But they're part of like this continuous sort of like lumberjack, guide, and hunter, like oral tradition that has been passed down. And I didn't even know that I was the one. I didn't know that they were so special, and I thought that was so neat when I rediscovered these as an adult, after not having given them a lot of thought. And of course, my grandfather had passed away by then, and it sort of just became like a hobby to dig in and see what kind of creatures I could discover and catalog them, because I thought it was so neat that my family had this history, and then I started to meet some other people who had some of this history, and it became a bit of an obsession of cataloging these things just for my own personal thing. And my wife informed me that I eventually, after a couple years of this, needed to do something with all of this information that I was collecting. And she suggested a book, because I always like to write and tell stories, and it's a family tradition, and so it became Mythical Creatures of Maine. And I go around and I tell old New England folk stories, both that my grandfather told me and that other people have told me since then, at events around Maine. And people tell me these awesome stories that they know and that their parents knew, and it's really amazing. Like this living storytelling tradition that exists here that we just take for granted. Of course, you know about the Side Hill Gouger.
So was your grandfather telling you this as a warning for certain things, kind of creeping up on you in the woods, to stay out of the woods? What was the reason for telling you these little legends, or
Well, there
telling you about these creatures, I guess I should say.
Yeah, there were, there was a lot of reasons. I mean, who am I to say what my grandfather's purpose was?
Hmm.
they were told to me like they were real parts of what was happening, like along with like, oh, this is a red pine, and it makes great lumber and pulp, and oh, those rock formations, that's carved out by the wedge ledge chomper, who's related to the this creature, that creature, and he kind of talk about how they gravel and digest it, and it just comes out just the same, but a little bit smaller. And then he'd go on and start talking about bears or berries or something else. And, so they were just like things that you could see. But anytime we would go camping, or he would set up a camp, and near his house, which was in the woods, he always would hang these little things, pieces of driftwood with feathers stuck in them, sometimes painted, and he called them grimolicans. And he said, oh, at night they transform and they kind of keep these creatures away. Now this was a guy who, like, not a lot of formal education, but just knew everything about nature, and he would always be putting these things up, and that was the same explanation that he would give them. So they were dangerous, but he wasn't afraid of them because he knew what they were up to, I guess. And did he believe in them? Did he not believe in them? A lot of folklorists say these fearsome critters are not, nobody ever believed in them, but I'm not convinced
Yeah.
that no. In fact, I know that people believe in these.
They had
So
to have. That's why we're still talking about them.
Yeah, and
Say
that's
we do.
yeah, we obviously do. We have a whole podcast about it.
Yeah.
But also, he had to believe in it a little bit, because it's almost like, I'm gonna put it up,
Yeah.
because if I'm wrong, that's
Right.
much worse.
Yeah.
Than being, better safe than sorry. And first, I just want to comment on the stories in here are awesome. We all have our own copy. We all ordered them right away.
Yeah.
But
awesome.
also your illustrator, Dan Kitchoff,
Yep.
he did a great
Kirchhoff.
job.
Kirchhoff.
Yeah,
Yep.
Kirchhoff. Yeah, they're really great, and especially for a podcast where we're trying to describe what these creatures look like. This is
Yeah.
probably the first time that we've had a book to reference while we were doing it, instead of being like,
Yeah.
what do you mean a horse's head and a serpent's body with flappy arms?
Yeah, like
What-
with fins on
With
the sides.
fins,
You're
yeah.
like, what does that look like?
So this is the first time that we've been able to put, some faces to names, if you will.
And especially with some of these names that I'm just like, where did these names come from, sir? Like the Wamphahofus.
The Wamphufus?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
I love
God bless
it.
you.
Yeah, the Wamphufus. Well, that's a widespread creature, and more people are familiar with the Wamphufus from Vermont, which is just another name for the side hill gouger. But they sort of bred them with cows, so the cows could keep their backs even and be able to eat on the steep green mountain pastures that they had out there in Vermont. And here the Wamphufus down in the White Mountains, which bleeded down into New Hampshire and into just really the southern piece of Maine. The Wamphufus is a creature that lives in puddles. He's a sort of a leathery creature with maybe long roots that go down into the mud, and he kind of looks like a lily pad, but the bubble that's next to that lily pad, that might be his eye. And you want to go around the puddles on the right side, because he's got a left arm, and just a left arm, and he can reach up, and he wants to grab your boots and or your Crocs or whatever.
I'm gonna
and
have an
eat
issue
'em,
because I'm
and
not
he-
gonna remember that.
I know. I was
Yeah,
just gonna say,
Wamphufus. It's good.
I was going to say, as you're pronouncing this name, I have to ask, how do you pronounce the two different types of mermaids?
Oh man, yeah. Those are so in here are of course lumberjack folklore and guide folklore, and then there's Wabanaki folklore,
Yeah.
which are the indigenous people, 5 nations that are the people who know this land best. They call it the Dawn Land. That's what Wabanaki means, and of course their pronunciations are there's no written Wabanaki originally, and there's a lot of the folklore words aren't, at least not that I could find, fully standardized into English. So some of these words I've heard speakers say,
Yeah.
and some of them I have not. Now I did quite a bit of digging about how the proper pronunciation of some of these go. The little one
Yeah.
is sometimes said like a lump again or lump again
Okay.
or lump again.
Yep.
And there's like gutturals and there's sounds and there's letters that we don't make in English.
Yeah.
And those are difficult for for us to say and sometimes even to realize that we're saying wrong. So,
Yeah.
you know, take any pronunciation suggestions I have with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
You're making
One
us
of the
feel better.
Yeah, you are. Because when we were reading the book, especially for me, I really stumble over pronouncing certain words in folklore. And these were definitely, I was like, I'm not saying, so I tried to just say it really fast. So it sounds
Yeah,
like I'm
and so
saying
I always put that
definitely.
disclaimer out there. I'm not Wabanaki. I'm not a speaker. I've definitely looked at it. I have the deepest respect for those people. And so sometimes I use like these alternate like names for them.
Yeah.
Like you know little water elves like the Lumpagin or the Nodumcanwet.
There it
And
is.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah.
sometimes called Apodumpkin, and like
Okay.
that's the same creature, but
Yeah.
it's you know it appears to be the same creature, and like these change sometimes, like they change like a feature of Wabanaki folklore and creatures with power and beings that like are a place. They are like nature. They change and they reflect their power with their ability to change and respond to situations and become very large, become very small, to change their shape. And indeed, they change their very nature as time progresses sometimes, or it appears so when you read like old 1800s, early 1900s sources about folklorists researching it. And then I talk to people I know today, they're talking about different things, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what is the explanation for that? I don't know. And you know, so there's and maybe we don't need to know, but we do know that these are people whose lives depended on nature
Yeah.
and they knew enough to stay alive with this intimate relationship, and that is the type of thing that you see with indigenous people, whether they're from Europe or whether they're from Africa or Asia. You know, they know all about the animals, and then they're like, and don't forget about these little people that live by this river.
Right.
They're pretty dangerous sometimes, or they can be pretty helpful, or this big hairy man in the woods, or the water serpent, or whatever, right? So these are things that are important to people who live in a way that is different than our relationship with the world.
Yeah.
So it's also
So
a form of respect in a sense.
Mm.
yeah, yeah, for sure. It's a form of relationship. And, you know, and so I try to, you know, being not, you know, someone from outside the culture, you know, there's things in the book that, you know, that are not in the book, that are things that I know about from people that I know. And I feel like that's their story to tell.
Sure.
And so that's everything that's in the book about indigenous stuff is stuff that's from anthropological records or made it into other books or newspapers, and sometimes preferably writings by indigenous people themselves.
Yeah.
'Cause they're very much still here and a huge part of Maine.
Yeah.
And they're my neighbors and friends and people I see. And
I love that. We deal with that a lot. I mean, our last season we did Colorado, and you know, I love that you're so respectful of it, because it's not about, you know, when you're talking about these things, it's not about proving it wrong or it sounds ridiculous to you. That's not our judgment to make. You know, these are stories that we're lucky enough to still hear, despite everything we've put them through, for them to even share with us. We are very lucky to be able to hear them. And especially with Maine, I love that you said earlier that this world of folklore and mythical creatures, and it is, and verbal storytelling is alive and well in Maine. And what do you think what about Maine allows that to happen? I find that a lot with Appalachian culture. That's still very much part of their culture, is that verbal storytelling that goes through decades and generations. And we had no idea that Maine was so deep rooted in this. And what
so
is it?
Rich.
Yeah, what is it about Maine that you think allows that tradition to live on?
yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things like the more isolated a culture was, like when French Canadian people moved here, their language kept them separate. And as you would guess, like immigration and moving into a place caused some conflict and created these somewhat isolated pockets of people that kept their culture, that kept this relationship with each other, and that storytelling about how to live on this planet and in a good way is stayed important. So like it sounds horrible, but like the more isolated, I mean, I don't know if it sounds horrible, maybe it's a blessing. Like the more isolated you are from sort of the homogenization of American media, I think the more you remember to tell your stories, and the more important those stories remain. A lot of like early folklorists would write like book lore is the death of folklore because it puts these living traditions down into books. And today we say, well, I got it from this book, but it's kind of frozen in time like that. And today we put it down into a video or a documentary or a podcast, and it kind of freezes it. Like it's just a moment, it's a snapshot. One of the things I love is like that, when you think about like I know a lot of musicians and they say, well, I did a record, right? Like it's a record of that moment of their music that they were making right then. And so it is just like a moment, right? That we capture in those things. And I think in Maine, people spend so much time outdoors. They spend so much time working with each other and doing things. And they have this outdoor tradition that it makes space for sharing these stories. And there's a lot of like people who work on the land still, and you fill your time with talking, right? And you see a lot of these stories starting to go away, right? Like there's one in there, the ding mall, which by historical records is definitely one of the most common creatures that's like super important through the early 1900s. And it's in newspapers all the time, it's in books. And today, my grandfather called it the Pelton Thumper. So he used a different name. It apparently, in all the newspapers in the 1800s, they said, it's formerly known as the Plunkus, but today it's the Ding Mall. And
The names.
and I've met exactly one person out of the hundreds and hundreds that I've talked to in the course of since writing this book in 2021 and doing all the research, leading or since it was published then, that has actually also has stories from their family about the Ding Mall. And so, it kind of goes away. And a lot of people have like fragments or just pieces of stories. And so, it becomes important that like we have something like this to jog our memory and say, oh,
Yeah.
this is important stuff to tell the story. I only wrote this book because I saw that somebody said these are important stories worth saving back in the 1950s or 60s when that book was written that I picked up. And then I was like, whoa, I'm part of that. That's amazing. And so many people have been like, I haven't thought about these stories since I was a kid and my grandfather told them to me. And it's neat. So, these stories are still here, but they become less and less common as people move, as we say, from away to here, including me, because I was actually born in Ohio, but my family's been here forever, so I moved away. So I don't get to be a Mainer. Nobody who isn't born here is, even though I've spent tons of time in here. Don't claim that. But I do hold some of those stories that are important to Maine. So I don't know. I think that answered your question.
That was
Yeah, no.
fantastic.
I was going to say, we kind of talked about this a little bit today while we were recording, that a lot of the stories that we kind of grew up with were Disney-fied, and like it loses that lore.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, it's just such a different, growing up with those versions of stories is just not the same as growing up with these creature stories and the mermaid stories where there's like real lore and like it's just such a different, and we need to keep telling those stories so that they don't get blanked out by the Disney version of things.
Yeah. And being that you've grown up with it, is there a favorite? Or even maybe not even just a favorite, just is there something that still to this day scares you?
Scares me.
Yes.
A lot of these stories I find, I find that I'm less scared than I once was. I heard all sorts of stories of like lake serpents, and they would come get me, and those were like purely meant to tease me, and as the youngest in my generation,
I'm
they
terrified
would
of
it would
water, so
grab
I
me
love that
from the
you said
lake.
that.
Yeah, and I'm to this day terrified of open water. I'm a terrific swimmer. I love paddling and going out into like the wilderness, and I will do both of those things. But sometimes the creatures of the deep still stir those fear in me. But having written this was actually somewhat cathartic. It allowed me to like say, oh, that's part of what this is. And part of the stories are like, be brave, know what's out there, and know the risks, but be there anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Be in the world, do the thing anyways. And that's what these stories like call to us about. So I think that's the fear one that I have. But
Funny, I got a different message on that voicemail. Hey, these are the things that are out there. Avoid at all costs.
I don't know. I feel like reading this book also like prepares you, like more about these creatures. So like if
absolutely.
you do come upon them in the woods or something like that, you'll be like, oh, I know this. I know what this is.
But you see, I'm still going to avoid the water, but I'll happily go into the forest and deal with like the come out of body, just because I want to be able to say the name.
Yeah.
Oh,
or
yeah.
the fairies.
Or the giants.
Yeah.
I would love to experience that, because I think you mentioned that there was a connection there with, do you pronounce it a Wendigo or a Wendigo?
Yeah.
We've been debating this since Supernatural.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because that word, I mean, that creature, these cannibal giants that are transformed, cursed people, are kind of a universal sort of greater Algonquin language group phenomenon. And there's each culture has a different name for it, and maybe it's a slightly different creature or feeling, the way that spirit manifests and affects those people. So here they say Chenu, or the Penobscot word I can't actually say, but it's like Kiwak, or something along those lines. There's a couple gutturals in there that I can't say, but that's the name that you would hear if you were talking to an indigenous person. But the lumberjack stories are about, and the guide stories that you find in the old literature are, in the French Canadian stories, they say Wendigo. I've never heard someone, they're spelled Wendigo.
They sure are.
Yeah, I've not heard someone that was an old timer talk about it in that word, or in that way, and that's not the local indigenous word for it. So I'm not sure I can definitively define that one for you.
Nope,
but
you're
I
on our
say
side.
Wendigo.
You're
Yeah,
team
I say
Folktown now.
Wendigo.
Yeah.
And,
We're gonna send
I
you a
mean,
hoodie. You're in.
those are active stories in cultures, and they have ways of saying it. So I mean, I guess you would need to talk to some of the people in the upper Great Lakes area to settle that, for sure.
Absolutely.
And when we recorded today, we were focusing on the water. We're going to the forest next week, but we were talking about sea creatures. And one thing that we were so just kind of irate about is the Disneyfication and the unification, which doesn't belong there, of a siren and a mermaid, and how they've kind of tried to turn them into the same thing, when a siren, completely different than a mermaid. And you have the different versions of mermaids in your book, but do you have an opinion on that? Because we were very pissed off about it.
and rightly you should be.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I
he's
guess
getting a hoodie.
I've not given that particular morph of, cultural change a lot of thought. I try to, at first I was like, it's very Western and scientific to be like, we're going to put down, this is what it is. But these
Yeah.
creatures change and adapt. And,
Yeah.
maybe Disney has changed them a lot, but in some ways, like maybe it's helped to preserve some of them
That's
a little
true.
bit to keep
Fair.
people talking about sirens and mermaids at all. But yeah, I do think historically they're pretty different.
I actually showed them a picture of a statue that I found that is in some museum from, I think it was like 300 something BC. And it was of a siren. And I mean, it was a woman's head, but it looked like a chicken's body. And I was just like, it's very much not a mermaid.
Yeah.
We were very mad about that.
I was
can
like,
just tell you.
I don't even understand how 1 + 1 = 2 there. I just.
Well, maybe it's because they change shapes. So like maybe
They are
there's something with
shapeshifters,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're reaching.
So
I'm the skeptic of the group. in
she
case-
is. I will just tell you that now. Dayelle and I come into this. I mean, we believe it all.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, obviously, this is real.
We eat this stuff up.
We
Your
are ready.
stories, incredible.
Like, to me, this is, like when you go hiking and you have I have like my little Audubon bird book, poisonous. Like, I've got my little books that I go hiking with.
Now this is that.
I'm going to have this in there and be bird watching for creatures. Like, to me,
Correct.
this is already true.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is, I'm in.
Yeah.
And Deena tries to teacher us out of it.
You just be in the know.
Yeah.
Be in the know.
I'm a biologist. I'm
I
a
was just gonna
teacher,
say,
and
Science us this.
I'm actually stunned with how much you know that you're not in history or I guess literature in some way, but more history. I would totally peg you as that over a science teacher, but I guess your love of nature, of the
makes
outdoors,
sense.
like, I could see it, but I don't know how you don't have some sort of historical background to you. Like, you need to add another degree, sir.
yeah.
You
Well,
deserve one.
teaching
Yeah.
is storytelling, right? Like
Absolutely.
we're selling knowledge to people that don't want it.
Yeah.
Forced to be there, and so you have to
forcing.
make it compelling.
Do you use this within your classroom? Because I would hope that high schoolers would appreciate some of this Maine folklore.
I do. I have a jackalope hanging in my
Wonderful.
classroom, and people are like,
Incredible.
"Where'd you get that thing?" And I'm like, "Oh, out west," And it was just like I had to go hunting while I was out there, and it's a good one. It's like a 5-pointer, and
Wow.
so
Conversation starter.
And then, they know I've written this book. So stuff comes up, they'll ask me about it.
Yeah.
And, and it's, I think the most important thing about it that I always stress with them is like, whoever your ancestors were, these stories were really important. They were important enough to pass down this idea that these things are out there. And we want to put everything in a box and say we get it because things need to be verifiable and quantifiable and provable and nameable and fixed. But like that's not how nature works. That's not how our ancestors thought about nature, right? You get yourself into trouble with that where you're like, well, the shore is right here, except when it's not, and it floods and it's everywhere else. And then the river changes its location, and now part of Kentucky is on the other side of the Mississippi, right? And so I think it does, it all interplays, right? Everything is a great story. Our stories are about biology and science, and it's a powerful magic that we're spinning in the world right now.
Preach.
I love that.
Me too.
I'm just like, I'm on a teacher high right now. Like, I really am. Like, this is awesome.
So we're diving into the woods for our next episode. And one thing that we found, so far we've done, in our series, we went to New Orleans, we went to Charleston, we went to Sleepy Hollow, which is very close to where we were, and Deena is a guide in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. And we've, done Colorado, and every single season, oh, there you are, every single season, there is a Bigfoot sighting.
Yeah.
Except for Sleepy Hollow.
Except
Yeah.
for Sleepy Hollow. That we know. That we know.
Of, right? Yeah.
But that's been, I think, the most universal. That's been the most across every culture. In Colorado, we also had the Yeti.
yeah.
Our big white abominable snowman. But do you have? It's big in Maine culture too, and we always joke like no matter where we choose,
Yeah.
we're gonna get one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Some variation of
Yeah.
it for sure.
So
Yeah,
in
man,
Maine,
he gets around.
yeah, in Maine, what is? Because I mean I read it in your book, but if you could just give us a little taste of what we're to expect with our boy Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, Bigfoot is alive and well here. That's the American sort of folk cryptid and cryptid, and I'm the assistant director to the International Cryptozoology Museum, which is
I was
located
just gonna
right
bring
here
that up.
in Bangor. Well, in Portland right now, but we're moving to Bangor. We're actually moving things
This
around.
is great because
right
we were
now.
just about to talk about this in our next episode.
Yeah.
We are so excited that this is in Maine. Okay, please lay it on us.
And so we've got we've got all sorts of Bigfoot sightings, and some go way back, and there's a lot of like active searching, and you see things, and Maine has a lot of empty space. There's more trees in Maine and more wilderness in Maine, quote unquote, than anywhere else east of the Mississippi. So, I guess if he's going to be somewhere, he's going to be here. One of my favorite stories about Bigfoot is the Medibemps howler story, which is these sort of out down east, as we call it, which is just in the furthest eastern coast area. There's a bunch of lakes out there, and there's these big hairy giants that show up while the parents are out fishing and hunting, and these two girls are at camp and they're cleaning some fish, and these Medibemps howlers show up, and they're doing the Bigfoot cry, I guess, in the distance, and they end up there and they take the fish and off they go, and they're like twice as tall as these girls, and that's a story from, I don't know, 60s or 50s, somewhere in there.
Ooh, I
And
love it.
yeah, so I love the name, the Medibemps howler. We've got all sorts of like
Another
wild man
wonderful one.
legends
Yeah.
that appear, but a lot of those wild man legends, like we're filling in like when they wrote about him in a newspaper, they literally often meant like a hermit, like some dude that just like lives in the woods. And we just say, oh, wild man, that's Bigfoot. But they literally just meant like some weird dude who lives in the woods is following me around.
Yeah.
And that was scary. And then he disappeared. And that was really scary, right? Because where did he go? And where's he going to show up again? And so hermits are a active part of our folklore as well. And actual like reality. Like people, there was just like within the last 5 years, some guy who had been living in the woods, like with nothing, not in a house or in a cabin or anything like that, for like a decade. And he'd been raiding cabins and stashing stuff that he stole in these buried trash cans, and spending winters under torrential snow in central Maine, and evading cameras, just like our friend Bigfoot. And so there's
That's impressive.
yeah, I mean, it's shocking, really. And the tradition of hermits is huge in Maine. Like everywhere has their local hermit story. And often they're just people who are like, I'm sick of this rat race. I'm just going to go live off the land in the
grid.
woods. And I can relate. But
Yeah, I was going to say, can we join them right now?
I was going to say, I can relate, but I wouldn't survive.
Fair.
So, I mean, there's the difference right there. You throw me in central Maine for a winter, I might last 2 days. But the fact he survived, you said 5 years? That's wild.
You said a decade.
Oh,
yeah,
a
like
decade.
a decade.
Oh my God,
It's an insane amount of
That's
time.
even
Now,
more.
this isn't in the book, but there will be a chapter on hermits in the sequel to this book. I thought
there's
this was
a sequel.
a complete
We're so excited.
collection, but I stand corrected because I have gathered more stories since then, and it'll be a little different flavor, but it will definitely be a sequel.
Oh, we have to have you back when that comes out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well,
That's
it'll
super
be a
exciting.
minute because I've got another project in between, but
What's that?
yeah, I'm writing about wolves right now.
Ooh.
So,
like
and there's some
that.
great folklore, but I'm into the science part at the moment. But it'll spill over into folklore and the Lugaroo, which of course you guys have down by you,
We
like the
did. We
Rougarou.
did a story on it.
Yeah, because it's like the Acadians from here got shipped out. Like when Britain took over northern New England, they're like, get out of here, you French Canadians, who were the Acadians, not the Quebecois. And they sent them down to New Orleans. And the stories are the same.
I don't remember if it was in your book or if I read it somewhere else, but somebody had said that, you know, these creatures were on the boat. And I was like, oh, that's the creepiest line. Oh, that's a creepy line.
Yeah, they came over.
They sure did.
They traveled with us. And that's
We have
definitely in
arrived.
there.
So
That's
we're making the trip to Maine this summer. We'll have recorded the season already, but we're gonna make the trip, and we need to know. You need to be our guide right now. Where are we hitting up? Where are we going?
What are the best places for some of this lore?
Obviously, we're gonna come visit you at the museum. That's obvious.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Definitely see us there. And one of like there's so many great places in Maine, like checking out Katahdin and Baxter State Park, where you get like this huge sort of green heart of Maine that, you know, was preserved by a former governor who's like, we should have like 4 townships that we just don't do anything with. And you know, he made Baxter State Park, which has the tallest mountain, which is of course got Pomola on the top. You gotta, if you're into mountain climbing, go up there. Otherwise, just look for him.
We will be
Uh,
looking from the bottom.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then the Emden petroglyphs are really cool. If you get a chance to go up on the Kennebec River, out to the town of Emden, you can go to this little campground there. I'm not sure what it's called currently. It's like Evergreen Campground, and you can rent a canoe, paddle across the river, and there's this ledge covered in pecked petroglyphs that have, and there's a picture of it of a sea serpent or a lake serpent, a river serpent.
Nope.
Really, the indigenous people don't have a lot of sea serpents. They have a lot of like river serpents.
Yeah.
And there's a petroglyph picture right in there. If you look up like lake serpent, I think it's under L.
That's in your book.
It is. And that's one of like, that's on a huge ledge that is made of slate, and it is covered in maybe 200 petroglyphs, and it's really cool.
That is very cool.
And it's a really special
Yeah.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have to hit
I was
that.
like, I've seen that.
Yeah. I remember this.
So before we let you go, because we are very happy that you're here, but we just heard you have to go be a teacher tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we will let you go because it is late. But we are going to wrap up our season, like I said, in a couple weeks. And we want to know, you know, as far as belief goes, you've kind of given us your view on this, but like, is there a creature that you believe, like there's enough proof that this is a thing, not active now, I should say, a creature active now in Maine?
Well, when I sign books for people, I always sign them, all these stories are true. So,
that.
you know, I'll throw that
Love
out there,
that.
which like makes some people like viscerally angry.
Yeah.
But I'm sticking to it.
I love that.
I'm sticking to my story.
Maybe you should just sign
but
it
I
like,
think-
don't turn around.
Yeah, watch out behind you.
Yes.
I think the little people creatures are
They're
like the little elf-like creatures.
Yeah.
I think they have, you know, they're outside of biology. They have the ability to step between worlds, to walk into the ground, to become things. And people still tell me Lutin stories,
Yeah.
which are French Canadian
The
elves.
little tiny guys.
Yeah, and they tell me experiences with them, and you know, I think if one of them is you know, nearest and dearest to my heart and my experience in the world, it would be those little people. My mom tells me I used to go on hunts for those guys all the
I
time
love that.
and
love
point
that
them out.
too.
That was me
And
with
so-
fairies. Yeah, that was me with
Yeah,
fairies
I'd
as a
love
kid.
to see. I'd love to hang out with one, or maybe I wouldn't. I'm not too sure. Right? You got to be careful what you wish for.
Or
True.
maybe you already have and you didn't even know.
True.
That's a distinct possibility. Yeah.
Well, I hope you get to see one.
Yeah.
Again.
Us too.
Again.
Exactly.
Again,
A little
that's right.
prankster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I did see one, and I just don't want to tell you the story.
Yeah, that's fair. Keep it for book 2, which we will have you back for book 2 when it comes out.
There you go. There you
And
go.
we will definitely see you in Maine.
Yeah.
It
Thank
was
you.
a pleasure talking with
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a really fun conversation, and
really was.
I appreciate it. I can't wait to hear the episode, and maybe if you guys ping me when you're in town, we'll
we will.
Be able
you.
to
So that
have
I
a
can
cup of coffee.
I can
or
ask you
something.
even more nerdy questions.
Yeah, do not threaten
Yeah.
us with a good time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
that I can't because we're on a time limit right now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. We
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much. Have a great night.
Thank you
Bye.
guys. Have a great
Bye.
night.
Thanks
and
so much.
Enjoy. Thanks for telling the stories
Always.
and keeping it real.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Absolutely. Bye.
Yep. Bye bye.